EMS guy. In the days before the internet, I got fired by a private ambulance company for using the wrong pen to fill out Medicaid forms after a run. I used a ballpoint instead of the soft-tip flare pens and was immediately sacked by the owner. A few years later, I found out he was imprisoned for Medicaid fraud. Turns out the soft-tip pens he provided didn't go through all the carbon copies on the forms, and he was changing the bottom sheet to show more miles and services for each ambulance run before sending them to the state. The day I used the ballpoint was for a very long ride and cost him a lot of fraudulent money. That's why he was so infuriated. I would mail him boxes of ballpoint pens to the prison if I were you. My university makes us buy a public speaking textbook published by the university and tear rubrics out of it. Your grades are penalized if you don't turn in the rubric torn out of the book for the teacher to mark your grade on. This ensures that you can't resell your book, so the next class has to buy brand new books. All the while, the university is putting up signs about why you should recycle. Not big compared to some others here, but I'm still salty about it. Edit. Update. I've just received an email to inform me that access to the building with the computer labs running expensive software we're required to use for homework is a privilege, not a guaranteed right. I worked as a counselor at a youth shelter. Almost all the food clothes were donated by local churches, and they didn't buy anything for the kids, so theoretically they were just paying to keep the lights on and to keep on minimum wage staff. They had a ridiculous amount of grant money, enough to cover the food clothes plus activities for the kids if they had to pay for those things. Yet they skimped out on essential things like training. They gave me a CP certification without ever giving me any training. The shelter had rats and roaches and at times bed bugs. The heat was out for a month during a blizzard on Christmas, with girls residing at the shelter. I reported them and nothing happened except them interrogating the entire staff to find out who snitched. So clearly a lot of people were getting paid the money that was supposed to be going to homeless youth. Worst place I ever worked. Edit. The kids were a blast though. Loved everyone that came through and that made it a much more bearable nightmare. That's straight out of Oliver Twist. Damn it, it's been nearly 200 years since that got published, how is it still so relevant? Most countries in Africa have the most blatant public corruption out there. Here is my example. Working in the country of Chad, which I don't recommend in case anybody asks, and brought my box 360 in checked baggage. Going through X-ray screening on way out of airport and almost conned out of money by the screener, but he didn't speak any English so he gave up. 1 month later, flying out of the country you have to open all your bags before ticket counter and they inspect for random things. Of course I had my box 360 and conversation went like this. Corrupt inspector. Zbox? Me? Yes, brought it from the States for personal use and now bringing it back. Corrupt inspector. Invoice? Me? No invoice, personal use, bought in the States and bringing it back. Corrupt inspector. No, invoice. This goes on for a couple more iterations until a local behind me pipes up. Local traveler. Just pay him. Me. How much? Local traveler. Just something. Ended up forking over 10,000 SFA to him in front of everybody, roughly $15 United States dollars. Corrupt inspector. Okay, no problem, while zipping back up my checked baggage. I won't go into details, but I work for a municipality as a fairly low-level employee. I've been offered bribes on a number of occasions to let things slide here and there. All very tempting, but I like my job too much to risk it for $20 or so. Long story short, the biggest bribe I have been offered is $1,000. I reported it to my supervisor, and his response was, "Fuck dude, why didn't you take it?" I sure as hell would have. But we filed an official report. Didn't go anywhere as I didn't know the name of the people. Makes me wonder what else is going on that I don't know about. An old friend of mine got a job working for a church-based charity. They would accept household donations and sell them in a thrift store they had set up to raise funds for the needy. His job was to drive around in a cube van, pick up the donated items and deliver them to the charity. He openly bragged about picking the best items for himself and would drop them off at his house before delivering the rest of the items to the charity. I called him out on it and told him it was a bad idea, seeing as his cousin and 2 aunts worked there and put in a good word for him to get hired. That's when he told me that they've been doing the same thing for years. He told me his aunts wouldn't even keep most what they stole, rather they would sell the items at garage sales, and that it was okay because that's how they make their money. To make matters worse, they were paid in cash so they could keep collecting welfare. Pure trash, and needless to say I have nothing to do with them anymore. I'm literally an illegal drug dealer and run a cleaner business than those cunts. In December, one of my technicians at work called me while at a high-end neighborhood we have a lot of problems with homeowners in. He told me to just listen since he had his Bluetooth headphones on. The customer is sitting there on the phone talking to someone at his company, asking how many essential personnel they can cut to get the most out of their bonuses. It's the kind of thing you see in movies, but it was surreal as hell to hear someone saying that in real life while being totally serious about it. I've heard that kind of dehumanizing talk inside my workshop from a couple accountant customers. I regularly make the jokes around the idea that accountants don't believe dignity or integrity exists because they can't find the spreadsheet. We had an accountant fire about 20% of the company a while back, including a bunch of supercritical employees. It was later revealed that the accountant had simply taken a spreadsheet of names, job titles, salaries, and simply fired anybody who, in their opinion, was being paid above their job title. Turns out that several key employees had been given raises to keep them on board, but their job titles hadn't been updated. Company failed and had to sell everything about 3 years later. Realizing that I was the only one who wasn't stealing from the company. Used to work in the IT department, and over time I noticed that things were going missing. Replace a bunch of monitors in a lab, then a few weeks later notice all the old ones are back. What happened to the ones I just delivered? We don't have nearly as many of something in stock as it says on our shipping receipt. And why are we always out of service kits for the copy machines? Yeah, all of that was going on eBay or Craigslist or somewhere else. Didn't realize it for years, maybe I'm just really oblivious, but the whole department was in on this. They stole bottles of water at my old job. There was no inventory that was kept. The supplier would deliver enough water every week to hydrate an entire country. New manager came in and demanded the water to be counted as stock as well. After the changes were in effect, we only needed 24x6 water bottles, reducing the personal costs drastically. Some people steal everything. My wife and I bought a house. The landlord wanted access to the apartment we were living in the meantime, so he could renovate it and sell it at an exorbitant price. We told him multiple times that we were going to keep and maintain the apartment to the end of our lease, only had 23 days left, and that we were going to clean it, etc., like normal. He didn't like that. So he performed an illegal lockout, then charged us a $750 cleaning fee, saying we left it a mess, the entire $1,900 rent for the last month, and attempted to keep our $1,900 security deposit. What he didn't know is I'm not one of these uninformed foreigners he's used to threatening. I live in Nick and Bensonhurst, which is a heavy Russian, Pole, Italian and Chinese immigrant population. I know the law damn well. So I went to the apartment and recorded him in the act of locking me out. I'm big black dude, so I was showing restraint by not manhandling him, since I'd immediately be found at fault. Then I gathered every ounce of proof I could, built a case and sued his ass. We also hit him with 311 hazard reports, and he got charged a shit ton for repairs. Lead, it was one spot in the closet, but he was still charged. After about 2 months of back and forth, he acquiesced and settled out of court, giving us back the full last month and full security without charging us the cleaning fee. Know the law, people. Don't let anyone try to pull one over on you. Raffle for a jet ski at a local carnival sponsoring the local volunteer fire department. When they called the winner of the jet ski, I was standing right behind the guy who drew the ticket. When the ticket was drawn, he called a completely different name than was on the ticket. Winner was a close friend of the fire chief. I've told this story before, but I used to be neighbors, back in the 1990s, with the captain of USS Nimitz. Like all the Navy ships, they have a big-ass Christmas party, funded by a budget line called MWR, Morale, Welfare, and Recreation. Bigger ships get bigger budgets for having more sailors, and Nimitz had 5,000 sailors, so their party was big. They had a raffle, and when you have a raffle with 5,000 sailors and their families, the raffle budget gets huge too, so while my dad's ship, with less than 400 sailors, gave away a bicycle, Nimitz was giving away a new car. So, Captain W was on stage turning the basket full of raffle tickets, and his wife J drawing the tickets for the prizes. She draws out the ticket for the car and hands it to her husband. She then takes her own family's tickets out in case they win. W starts reading the numbers, and after reading 4 numbers, he looks over at his wife, who says, laughing, "We're still in this." W reads the final numbers on the ticket, and J turns to him with one of her tickets and says, "You're not going to believe this. Yeah, the captain's wife won the big prize." The place was variously stunned or laughing nervously. Fortunately, they're not corrupt bastards, so the skipper took both tickets, tore them up into tiny pieces on stage, and J drew another ticket, so someone got the car. Then W and J had to go home and tell their daughter, who had just turned 16 and had been asking for a car, that they couldn't accept it. She was understanding, but I could tell she was disappointed.